You know it's a good marriage when your wife brings home divorce papers with a smile brighter than a Vegas casino sign. That's exactly what Alicia did on a Tuesday evening in October, sliding the manila envelope across our kitchen table like she was serving dessert. "Greg, honey," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for yoga clients and bill collectors. "I need to talk to you about something important. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I looked up from my meatloaf, fork halfway to my mouth. After 12 years of marriage, I'd learned to read Alicia's moods like weather patterns. This particular storm had been brewing for months. The late-night texting, mysterious yoga retreats, and her sudden interest in finding herself at 34. "Let me guess," I said, setting down my fork. "You want to redecorate the living room again?" She laughed, but it sounded hollow, like an empty beer can rattling in the wind. "No, silly. It's about us, about our future." That's when she produced the divorce papers, spreading them out like a poker hand she was certain would win. But here's the kicker. She wasn't asking for a divorce. Not exactly. "I want you to accept my male friend, or we'll have to break up," she announced, her smile never wavering. I stared at her, wondering if I'd somehow slipped into an alternate universe where wives casually discussed their male friends over Tuesday night dinner. "You're what now?" "Dominic," she said, as if that explained everything. "He's been helping me with some personal growth exercises. Very deep spiritual stuff. You wouldn't understand." Oh, I understood all right. I understood that my wife had been playing house with some guy named Dominic while I'd been busting my ass at Foster Hardware, trying to keep our small business afloat in a town where Home Depot was the new church and I was the dying religion. "Personal growth exercises," I repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Her smile flickered for just a second. "Don't be crude, Greg. This is about expanding our relationship, opening new doors, exploring other people's bedrooms. You're being deliberately obtuse." She stood up, smoothing down her yoga pants, the same ones she'd bought for her spiritual journey 3 months ago. "Dominic and I have a connection, a deep, meaningful connection that transcends physical attraction." I almost choked on that line. Transcends physical attraction? I'd seen this Dominic character around town. He was the kind of guy who wore tank tops to show off his gym muscles and drove a lifted truck with truck nuts hanging from the hitch. Real spiritual, that one. "So let me get this straight," I said, standing up to face her. "You want me to accept that you're sleeping with another man, or you'll divorce me?" "I'm not sleeping with him." The protest came too quick, too sharp. "We're exploring a deeper connection. And yes, if you can't accept that I need more than what this marriage offers, then maybe we should part ways." That's when it hit me. She'd already made her choice. The divorce papers weren't a threat. They were a safety net. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Keep the stability of marriage while getting her thrills elsewhere. And if I didn't play along, she'd take half of everything I'd worked for and run off with her spiritual guru. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd married had been wild, sure, but she'd also been honest about it. This version was something else entirely, a carefully constructed lie wrapped in designer yoga wear. "You know what, Alicia?" I said, reaching for the pen she'd thoughtfully provided. "You're absolutely right." Her eyes widened as I signed my name with a flourish across the bottom of the divorce papers. "Greg, what are you—" "I'm accepting your proposal," I said, tossing the pen onto the table. "You want out? You got it. But don't expect me to make this easy for you." For the first time since she'd walked in with those papers, Alicia's composure cracked. "No, wait. You misunderstood. I didn't mean—" But I was already walking toward the door, grabbing my jacket from the hook. "Oh, I understood perfectly." You thought you'd back me into a corner, make me choose between sharing you or losing you. Well, congratulations, honey. You just got your freedom. I paused at the door, looking back at her pale face. Give my regards to Dominic. Tell him he's welcome to take over the mortgage payments, too. The door slammed behind me with a satisfying bang, and I stood on my own front porch, breathing in the crisp October air. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the wine coven. That's what Richard called the 3 neighborhood gossips who met every evening on Mrs. Patterson's porch, chattering away like a bunch of caffeinated squirrels. Perfect. By tomorrow morning, the whole town would know that Greg Foster had finally grown a spine. I climbed into my pickup truck, the same reliable Ford I'd been driving for 8 years, and started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Alicia through the kitchen window, still standing by the table, staring at those signed papers like they might spontaneously combust. She thought she'd won. She hadn't seen anything yet. Revenge, I decided over my 3rd beer at Murphy's Tavern, is a dish best served with a 6-pack and a power drill. Not that I was planning anything violent. I'm not that kind of guy. But sometimes a man needs his tools, and after 12 years in the hardware business, I had plenty of those. Richard found me there an hour later, nursing my wounded pride and plotting my wife's social destruction. My best friend since high school slid into the booth across from me, his round face creased with concern. Heard about the divorce papers, he said without preamble. Wine Coven's been working overtime. Mrs. Patterson called my Linda, who called her sister, who called half the town. Good, I said, taking another swig of beer. Let them talk. Greg, maybe you should think about this. Alicia's been acting strange lately, but... Strange? I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Richard, she asked me to accept her boyfriend or get divorced. That's not strange. That's batshit crazy. Richard winced. Boyfriend? I thought she said he was just a friend. Yeah, and I'm just a hardware store owner who happens to know how to wire a house, fix a car, and make someone's life very, very complicated. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You remember Halloween party at your place last year? Sure. What about it? 2 Catwomen showed up, remember? Your Linda and that brunette from the bank. But Alicia spent the whole night flirting with that contractor, Dominic Vega, the one with the stupid truck and the even stupider tribal tattoos. Richard's eyes widened. The guy who kept doing those bicep flexes every time someone took a picture? That's the one. I caught them in your kitchen, and she was feeding him cake with her fingers. When I asked about it later, she said she was just being friendly. I drained my beer and signaled for another. Turns out she's been real friendly with him for months. The next morning, I woke up in my truck outside the hardware store with a hangover and a plan. The first part was simple. If Alicia wanted to play games, I'd make sure everyone in town knew the rules. I opened the store at 7 sharp, same as always. Pete, my 23-year-old employee, showed up 15 minutes later with coffee and donuts from Miller's Bakery. Boss, he said, setting down the coffee, I heard about you and Mrs. Foster. I'm sorry, man. Don't be sorry, Pete. Be ready to work. I took a sip of coffee and pulled out my phone. We're going to be very busy today. The beauty of living in a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. The curse is that everyone knows everyone else's business. But sometimes, you can turn a curse into a weapon. I started small. A casual comment to Mrs. Henderson when she came in for garden hose. Yeah, Alicia's been spending a lot of time at that new yoga retreat center. Very intensive, apparently. Sometimes she doesn't come home until morning. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up like Roman candles. Really? How dedicated of her. By noon, I'd planted similar seeds with 6 customers. Nothing too obvious, just enough to get people thinking. But my real masterpiece came when I remembered something Alicia had forgotten. She'd left her old phone in my truck last month when hers died, and she'd never changed the cloud backup password. During my lunch break, I scrolled through months of text messages between my wife and her spiritual advisor. Let me tell you, there's nothing spiritual about what they were discussing. The messages were explicit, detailed, and absolutely damning. More importantly, they proved this had been going on for 4 months, not the recent development she'd claimed. I took screenshots of the worst ones and saved them to a flash drive. Then I drove over to Serenity Studio, Alicia's yoga place, and let myself in with the spare key she'd given me years ago. The studio was empty. Alicia taught evening classes, but I knew her routine. She always left her purse in the back office while teaching, and she always forgot to lock the door. I slipped inside and planted a few printed screenshots in strategic locations, tucked into her appointment book, slipped between the pages of her meditation journal, and my personal favorite, folded inside the cover of her Sacred Relationships book. I was back at the hardware store before anyone noticed I'd been gone. That evening, I got a frantic call from Alicia. "Greg, we need to talk, right now." "About what?" I asked innocently. "Someone broke into my studio. They left things. Horrible things." "What kind of things?" "You know what kind of things." Her voice was shrill, panicked. "This is harassment." "Harassment?" "Alicia, those are your text messages. Your words. If they're horrible, maybe you should have thought about that before you sent them." The line went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small, defeated. "How did you get those?" "Same way Dominic got into your pants, apparently. You made it easy." She hung up on me. The next morning, Pete arrived at work grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Boss, you're not going to believe what happened last night." "Try me." Someone spray-painted Home Wrecker on Dominic Vega's truck in bright pink paint, and they let the air out of all 4 tires. Pete was practically bouncing with excitement. Cops are calling it vandalism, but half the town thinks it's hilarious. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was smiling. The note I'd left on his windshield had been a nice touch too. "You break homes, I break cars. Fair trade." Vandalism is a serious crime, Pete. I hope they catch whoever did it. "Yeah, right." Pete winked. "Whoever did it is a hero, if you ask me." By the end of the week, Alicia's yoga classes were half empty. Word had spread about the text messages. The wine coven had been very thorough in their distribution of information. Some of her clients were scandalized, others were just uncomfortable with the drama. Either way, her business was suffering. But I wasn't done, not even close. The thing about small-town gossip is that it spreads like wildfire in August, consuming everything in its path until there's nothing left but ash and regret. By the second week of my campaign, Alicia's reputation was smoldering nicely, but I was just getting warmed up. I was restocking the paint section when Susie Martinez walked in. Alicia's best friend since high school, Susie had always rubbed me the wrong way with her passive-aggressive comments and knowing looks. She was the type who'd smile to your face while sharpening knives behind your back. "Greg," she said, approaching me with that fake, concerned expression she'd perfected over the years. "I wanted to talk to you about Alicia." "What about her?" I didn't look up from the paint cans I was arranging. "She's devastated. This whole thing has gotten out of hand. Maybe you could call off the dogs?" I straightened up, meeting her gaze. "Call off what dogs, Susie? I haven't done anything but sign divorce papers." "Oh, please. We both know you're behind the rumors, the vandalism, all of it." She crossed her arms, trying to look intimidating in her designer jeans and perfectly applied makeup. "Alicia made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve this." "A mistake?" I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Susie, she's been screwing another man for 4 months and then had the balls to ask me to accept it. That's not a mistake, that's a choice." "You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. What I don't understand is why her best friend knew about it and never said a word to me." I watched her face carefully, saw the telltale flush that meant I'd hit a nerve. "You did know, didn't you?" Susie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not... I can't betray her confidence. But you can betray mine, apparently. I leaned against the paint counter, studying her. How long have you known Susie? How many times did you cover for her? How many lies did you help her tell? Greg, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Or am I finally being reasonable for the first time in months? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, making sure she could see it. Tell you what, why don't you explain to me exactly how long you've known about Dominic, and maybe I'll consider going easy on your friend. Susie's eyes widened when she saw the phone. You can't record me without permission. Actually, in this state, I only need one-party consent, and I'm consenting. I held up the phone. So, Susie, when did you first find out about the affair? She turned and fled, practically running out of the store. I stopped the recording and smiled. Sometimes the threat of exposure was more powerful than exposure itself. That afternoon, I decided to escalate things. I'd been thinking about Alicia's weekly wine and wellness workshop at the community center, where she taught breathing exercises to a group of middle-aged women who had more money than sense. It was scheduled for Thursday evening, and I had a feeling it was going to be very educational. I spent Wednesday evening creating flyers on my computer. Nothing too obvious, just a simple announcement. Community discussion, the truth about open marriages. Thursday, 7 p.m., Community Center. Learn about the real-world consequences of exploring new relationships, featuring real text messages and testimonials, sponsored by the concerned citizens of Millfield. I made 50 copies and distributed them around town Thursday morning. Coffee shops, grocery store bulletin board, library, post office. By evening, word had spread. Alicia's wellness workshop usually drew about 15 women. That Thursday, the community center parking lot was packed. I counted at least 40 cars, including several belonging to the Wine Coven and half the PTA. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I parked across the street and watched through the windows as Alicia tried to conduct her breathing exercises, while a crowd of curious townspeople filled the back rows, whispering and pointing. The workshop ended 20 minutes early. Friday morning brought my first real victory. Linda Patterson, the unofficial mayor of the Wine Coven, stopped by the hardware store with news. Greg, honey, she said, leaning conspiratorially across the counter. I thought you should know. Alicia's mother called her last night. Mrs. O'Brien is not happy about the situation. Mrs. O'Brien was a traditional Irish Catholic woman who believed in marriage, family, and public respectability, in that order. The idea of her daughter having an affair would be devastating enough, but the public humiliation would be unforgivable. Is that so? I tried to sound casual. Oh yes. Apparently she heard about it from her bridge club. They read about it on Facebook. Linda's eyes gleamed with malicious delight. Mrs. O'Brien is flying in from Phoenix next week to discuss the situation with Alicia. I almost felt sorry for my wife. Almost. That evening, I was closing up the store when Dominic Vega finally made his appearance. He swaggered through the front door like he owned the place, his muscles bulging under a tight t-shirt that probably cost more than most people's grocery budget. Foster, he said, his voice carrying that particular brand of arrogance that came from too many years of getting by on looks and charm. We need to talk. About what? I continued counting the register, not bothering to look up. About this harassment campaign you're running against me and Alicia. Now I looked up, meeting his steroid-enhanced glare with my own steady gaze. Harassment? I haven't harassed anyone. I've just been sharing information. Information? He stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. You vandalized my truck. Did I? That's interesting. Do you have proof? His jaw clenched. I know it was you. Knowing and proving are two different things, Dominic. I learned that in business. You should try it sometime instead of just flexing your way through life. You think you're real smart, don't you? He leaned across the counter, his face inches from mine. Let me tell you something, old man. Alicia came to me because you couldn't satisfy her. She needed a real man, someone who could give her what she was missing. I smiled, and something in my expression made him take a step back. Is that what she told you? I asked quietly. That I couldn't satisfy her? Among other things. Interesting. Because according to the text messages I found, she told you I was great in bed but boring everywhere else. According to those same messages, you're adequate but eager, which I think was her polite way of saying you try hard but finish fast. His face went red, then white. You're lying. Am I? Would you like me to read you the exact quote? I have it memorized. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. She also mentioned that thing you do with your tongue that she finds amusing but not effective. Her words, not mine. Dominic's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he turned and stormed toward the door. This isn't over, Foster. No, I called after him. It's not. But you might want to work on your technique before it is. Alicia's very detailed in her critiques. The door slammed behind him, rattling the windows. I finished counting the register, whistling softly to myself. Phase 2 was complete. Time for the finale. The beauty of revenge is in the details. Any idiot can key a car or spread rumors, but true artistry requires planning, timing, and an intimate knowledge of your target's weaknesses. After 12 years of marriage, I knew all of Alicia's weaknesses. After 2 weeks of surveillance, I'd learned Dominic's. The man was vain, predictable, and surprisingly stupid for someone who ran his own contracting business. He also had a schedule more rigid than a military operation. Gym at 6 a.m., coffee at Miller's Bakery at 7:30, job sites until 4 p.m., then home to his precious truck for an hour of detailing before dinner. That truck was his pride and joy, a lifted Ford F-250 with custom paint, chrome accessories, and enough aftermarket modifications to fund a small college education. He washed it every day, waxed it twice a week, and parked it in the same spot in his driveway where everyone could admire it. It was also going to be the centerpiece of my masterpiece. Saturday morning, I placed an ad in the regional newspaper's online classifieds. Open house, must-see, beautiful 3BR 2BA home with custom kitchen, finished basement, and stunning landscaping. Owner relocating, motivated to sell. Saturday 12:04 p.m., 247 Maple Street. No appointment necessary. Bring the whole family. 247 Maple Street was Dominic's address. I also created matching flyers and posted them on every real estate website I could find, complete with photos I'd taken of his house from the street and glowing descriptions of the motivated seller who was flexible on price. Then I sat back and waited. At noon sharp, the first car pulled into Dominic's driveway. Then another. By 12:30, there were 15 cars parked on his street and a growing crowd of confused house hunters milling around his front yard. I watched from Richard's house across the street, drinking beer and enjoying the show. Richard had been skeptical of my plan until he saw the results. Jesus, Greg, he said, peering through his living room blinds. There must be 30 people over there. 37, I corrected, having counted them myself. And here comes another car. Dominic's truck roared into the driveway at 12:45, scattering potential buyers as he laid on the horn. He jumped out, his face purple with rage, and started shouting at the crowd. Get off my property! This isn't for sale! Someone's playing a prank! But the damage was done. Half the town had seen the ads, and word was spreading fast. Even after Dominic managed to clear his yard, cars kept driving by slowly, their occupants gawking at the house that wasn't actually for sale. My phone rang at 2 p.m., Alicia's number. Greg, you have to stop this. Stop what? I asked innocently. You know what? Dominic is furious. He's talking about pressing charges. For what? I didn't trespass on his property. I didn't vandalize anything. I just shared some information about real estate opportunities. Fake information. Is it? How do you know he's not selling? Maybe he just forgot to mention it. I took a sip of beer, watching as another car slowed to look at Dominic's house. Besides, I thought you two were just friends. Why are you so concerned about his real estate situation? The line went quiet. Alicia, you still there? We need to talk. In person. I don't think that's a good idea. Your boyfriend might get jealous. He's not my boyfriend. The protest came too quick, too desperate. Then what is he? Your spiritual advisor? Your yoga partner? Your fuck buddy? She hung up. Sunday brought phase 2 of my plan. The annual Founders Day festival was next weekend, and I'd volunteered to help with the charity auction months ago, back when I was still a naive husband who thought his wife was just going through a phase. The festival was Millfield's biggest event of the year, drawing visitors from 3 counties and raising money for the volunteer fire department. This year's theme was Community Spirit, which I found ironically appropriate. I spent Sunday afternoon at the festival planning committee meeting where I made a special donation to the auction. I'd like to contribute a demolition service, I announced to the surprised committee. Professional-grade sledgehammer work, perfect for someone who needs to tear down an old shed, break up concrete, or just work out some frustrations. The winning bidder gets 2 hours of my time and all the tools they need. Martha Collins, the festival chairwoman, looked puzzled. That's unusual, Greg. Are you sure there's a market for that? Oh, I think you'd be surprised how many people in this town have something they'd like to see demolished. The committee approved my donation, and I left the meeting with a satisfied smile. Sometimes the best revenge was the kind people paid for. Monday brought unexpected complications. Pete arrived at work with news that made my blood boil. Boss, I heard something at the diner this morning about Mrs. Foster. What about her? She's been telling people you hit her, that you've been abusive for years, and that's why she had to find comfort elsewhere. I set down the inventory clipboard I'd been holding, my hands shaking with rage. She said what? I didn't believe it, of course. Neither did most people. But some of the newer folks in town, the ones who don't know you well, Pete shrugged apologetically. They might buy it. This was a new low, even for Alicia. I'd never laid a hand on her in anger, never even raised my voice until this whole mess started. But I knew how these things worked. The accusation alone would be enough to plant seeds of doubt in some people's minds. I closed the store early and drove straight to Murphy's Tavern, where I knew I'd find the after-work crowd. Sure enough, the place was packed with contractors, mechanics, and other blue-collar guys who'd known me for years. Gentlemen, I announced, climbing onto a chair so everyone could see me, I want to address some rumors that have been floating around town. The tavern went quiet. Some of you may have heard that I've been abusive to my wife. Let me be very clear about this. I have never, in 12 years of marriage, laid a hand on Alicia Foster in anger. I have never threatened her, intimidated her, or done anything that could be construed as abuse. I looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as I could. What I have done is expose her affair with Dominic Vega. What I have done is refuse to accept her demand that I share her with another man. And what I will continue to do is defend my reputation against anyone who tries to destroy it with lies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices rose in support, hands clapped me on the back, and several guys offered to have a word with anyone spreading false rumors. These were men who'd known me since high school, who'd worked with me, drank with me, and trusted me with their business. Their support meant everything, but I wasn't done yet. Tuesday afternoon, I implemented the final phase of my pre-festival strategy. Using my connections in the local business community, I arranged for a very special delivery to Serenity Studio during Alicia's busiest class of the week. At exactly 7 p.m., as 15 middle-aged women were attempting the warrior pose, a mariachi band arrived at the yoga studio. They set up in the parking lot and began playing La Cucaracha at maximum volume, complete with trumpets, guitars, and enthusiastic vocals. The music was so loud it could be heard 6 blocks away. I'd hired them for 2 hours and given them specific instructions. Play the most upbeat, energetic songs in their repertoire, and if anyone asked them to leave, they should politely explain that they'd been hired to celebrate love and new beginnings at this location. The yoga class ended after 20 minutes. The mariachi band played for the full 2 hours. By Wednesday, I could feel the momentum building. The whole town was talking about the ongoing drama between me, Alicia, and Dominic. People were choosing sides, and to my satisfaction, most of them were choosing mine. The wine coven had become my unofficial publicity department, spreading every detail of the story to anyone who would listen. Mrs. Patterson had even started keeping a journal of events, which she read aloud during their evening porch sessions. Thursday brought the news I'd been waiting for. Mrs. O'Brien had arrived from Phoenix. I was restocking the electrical supplies when Linda Patterson burst through the door like a woman on a mission. "Greg, you'll never guess what just happened." "Try me." Mrs. O'Brien showed up at Alicia's studio this morning. Right in the middle of the advanced class, she walked in, looked around at all those women in their yoga pants, and announced that her daughter was a disgrace to the family name. I tried to look appropriately shocked. "No kidding?" "Oh, it gets better. She demanded to know where this Dominic character lived, and when Alicia wouldn't tell her, she said she'd find him herself and give him a piece of her mind." Linda was practically vibrating with excitement. "Can you imagine? That sweet little old lady marching around town looking for her daughter's lover?" Actually, I could imagine it perfectly. Mrs. O'Brien might be 73 years old and barely 5 feet tall, but she had the moral authority of a fire and brimstone preacher and the determination of a guided missile. "I hope she doesn't do anything rash," I said, trying to keep the grin off my face. "Oh, I don't think you need to worry about that. She's a lady after all." Linda leaned across the counter conspiratorially. "But I heard she's planning to attend the festival this weekend. She wants to observe the situation firsthand." Perfect. Everything was falling into place for the grand finale. Friday evening, I got a call from an unknown number. "Foster, this is your last warning." The voice was muffled, obviously disguised. "Back off, or you'll regret it." I almost laughed. After everything I'd been through, someone thought they could scare me with anonymous phone calls. "Who is this?" I asked. "Someone who's tired of watching you destroy innocent people." "Innocent?" Now I did laugh. "There's nothing innocent about adultery, pal. But thanks for the warning. I'll file it right next to my divorce papers." I hung up and immediately called Richard. "I just got a threatening phone call. Anonymous, but I have my suspicions." "You think it was Dominic?" "Maybe. Or maybe it was someone else with skin in this game." I thought about Susie's panicked reaction when I'd questioned her about her knowledge of the affair. Either way, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow's the festival, and I'm going to end this once and for all. "Greg, maybe you should be careful. If someone's desperate enough to make threats." "Richard, I've been careful for 12 years. I've been understanding, forgiving, and patient. Look where it got me." I stared out my apartment window at the lights of downtown Millfield. Tomorrow, everyone in this town is going to know the truth. All of it. "What are you planning?" "Justice," I said, and hung up the phone. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for the Founders' Day festival. I arrived at the town square at 7 a.m. to help with setup, just like I'd done every year for the past decade. The only difference was that this year, I had a very special plan for the festivities. The festival committee had assigned me to manage the charity auction, which would take place at 2 p.m. on the main stage. Perfect timing. That was when the crowds would be at their peak, with families from all over the county gathered to enjoy the food, games, and entertainment. I spent the morning arranging auction items and greeting visitors, playing the role of the friendly local businessman. Several people offered their condolences about my marriage troubles, and I accepted them graciously while keeping my eyes on the prize. At noon, I spotted my targets. Alicia arrived with her mother, both women looking tense and uncomfortable. Mrs. O'Brien wore a severe black dress and an expression that could have curdled milk at 50 yards. They found seats near the back of the crowd, clearly hoping to avoid attention. Dominic showed up 20 minutes later, his freshly washed truck gleaming in the parking area. He dressed up for the occasion in khakis and a polo shirt, probably hoping to blend in with the respectable family crowd. Too bad for him that half the town knew his face by now. At 1:30, I took the microphone for the pre-auction announcements. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Founders Day charity auction. We have some wonderful items up for bid today, all proceeds going to support our volunteer fire department. The crowd applauded politely. I could see Alicia shifting uncomfortably in her seat, probably wondering what I had planned. Before we begin the bidding, I'd like to take a moment to talk about community values. This town was founded on principles of honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. Our ancestors believed that a community is only as strong as the bonds between its members. More polite applause. Mrs. O'Brien was nodding approvingly. Unfortunately, sometimes those bonds are tested by people who put their own selfish desires above the good of the community. People who lie, cheat, and betray the trust of those who love them. Now the crowd was getting interested. A murmur rippled through the audience as people began to realize this wasn't a standard festival speech. I'm talking, of course, about adultery, the betrayal of marriage vows, the destruction of families for the sake of temporary pleasure. Alicia's face had gone white. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, trying to get her to leave, but Mrs. O'Brien sat like a stone statue, her eyes fixed on me with laser intensity. Some of you know that my wife recently asked me to accept her relationship with another man. She called him her male friend and suggested that I should be understanding about their spiritual connection. The murmur grew louder. People were turning to look at Alicia, who had shrunk down in her seat like she was trying to disappear. Well, I found some of their text messages, and let me tell you, there was nothing spiritual about what they were discussing. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd prepared. For example, here's a message from my wife to her spiritual advisor. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Greg will be at the store until 6, so we have plenty of time to explore our connection. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Several people applauded. Mrs. O'Brien's face had turned purple with rage, but she still didn't move. Or how about this one? You make me feel alive in ways Greg never could. When can we meet at the motel again? Alicia jumped to her feet. Stop it. You can't do this. Can't do what, Alicia? Read your own words? Share your own messages? I kept my voice calm, reasonable. These are your texts, sent from your phone to your spiritual advisor. Those are private. We're private, past tense. The moment you decided to destroy our marriage, you gave up any right to privacy. I turned back to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the real face of adultery. Not some romantic movie fantasy, but the ugly reality of lies, betrayal, and selfishness. Dominic finally found his courage and stood up. That's enough, Foster. Is it? I don't think so. I smiled at him, the same smile I'd been practicing all week. Why don't you come up here, Dominic? Tell everyone about your spiritual connection with my wife. I don't have to listen to this shit. Language, please. There are children present. I gestured to the families scattered throughout the crowd. Although I suppose you're used to performing for an audience, aren't you? According to these text messages, you and Alicia had quite a few encounters in semi-public places. The crowd was eating it up. Some people looked shocked, others disgusted, but most seemed fascinated by the real-life drama playing out in front of them. Here's another good one, I continued, scrolling through my phone. Alicia writes, I told Greg I was at a yoga retreat, but really, I was in your bed all weekend. He's so trusting. It's almost too easy. Mrs. O'Brien finally spoke, her voice cutting through the crowd noise like a blade. Alicia Marie O'Brien Foster, you will come here this instant. The use of her full name had the desired effect. Alicia looked like she'd been slapped, her face crumpling as she realized the full extent of her public humiliation. Mom, please, now! Alicia stumbled toward the stage, tears streaming down her face. The crowd parted to let her through, everyone staring as she made her walk of shame. I'm sorry, she whispered when she reached the microphone. I'm so sorry, Greg. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, didn't it? 4 months of lying, cheating, and planning to leave me for your boy toy there. I nodded toward Dominic, who was trying to edge toward the parking lot. Oh no, don't leave now, Dom. We're just getting to the good part. I turned back to the microphone. Folks, we have a special treat today. As part of our charity auction, I've donated a demolition service. 2 hours of professional sledgehammer work, perfect for working out frustrations or destroying things that need destroying, the crowd murmured with interest. And as luck would have it, I happen to know that Mr. Vega there has a beautiful truck that could use some modifications. What do you say we make him the beneficiary of our charity work? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices shouted approval, people applauded, and several men started moving toward Dominic's truck. Now wait just a damn minute. Dominic pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger and panic. You can't touch my truck! Actually, I can. See, I checked with the county assessor, and you're 3 months behind on your property taxes. That makes your vehicle subject to seizure for debt collection. I pulled out a folded paper. I've got the documentation right here. It was a bluff. I had no such documentation, but Dominic didn't know that. He lunged toward me, fists raised, but Richard and 2 other men intercepted him. Let me go! That truck cost me $40,000! And my marriage was worth a lot more than that, I replied calmly. But you didn't seem to care about that when you were screwing my wife. The crowd had formed a circle around us now, everyone pressing close to see the confrontation. Someone started chanting, "Demo, demo, demo," and others picked it up. Mrs. O'Brien stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding attention from the entire crowd. Young man, she said, addressing Dominic with the authority of a Supreme Court justice, you have dishonored my daughter, destroyed a marriage, and brought shame upon this community. If Mr. Foster wants to demolish your truck, I think that's the least you deserve. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dominic looked around desperately, searching for support, but found none. Even the people who didn't know the full story could see which way the wind was blowing. This is illegal. You can't just destroy someone's property. Can I? I stepped down from the stage, picking up the sledgehammer I'd brought for the demonstration. Tell you what, Dom, I'll make you a deal. You can save your truck, but you have to do something first. What? Apologize. To me, to Alicia, to her mother, and to this entire community. Get down on your knees and admit what you did. Dominic's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. I'm not apologizing for anything. Alicia came to me. She wanted what I could give her. Wrong answer. I walked toward his truck, the crowd following like I was the Pied Piper. The sledgehammer felt good in my hands, solid and purposeful. Last chance, Dom. Apologize or watch me turn your pride and joy into scrap metal. You're bluffing. You won't do it. I raised the sledgehammer and brought it down on his front headlight. The crash of breaking glass was deeply satisfying. Stop! Dominic lunged forward, but the crowd held him back. Please, I'll pay you. I'll leave town. Just don't destroy my truck. Too late for that. I swung again, this time taking out the side mirror. You should have thought about consequences before you decided to fuck my wife. The crowd cheered with each swing. I worked methodically. Headlights, mirrors, windows, denting the hood and doors. Dominic was screaming, cursing, begging, but I tuned him out. This was about more than revenge now. This was about justice. When I was finished, his beautiful truck looked like it had been through a war zone. I set down the sledgehammer and turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can destroy other people's lives without consequences. Actions have results, choices have prices, and sometimes justice comes with a sledgehammer. The crowd exploded in applause. People were cheering, whistling, clapping me on the back. Someone started chanting my name. I looked over at Alicia, who was sobbing in her mother's arms. Mrs. O'Brien met my eyes and nodded once, a gesture of approval and understanding. Dominic had collapsed next to his ruined truck, staring at the damage in shock. His contractor business would survive, but his reputation in this town was finished. No one would hire a man who'd been publicly humiliated for breaking up a marriage. "Next time you want an open marriage, Alicia," I called out, my voice carrying over the crowd noise, "try Craigslist. You might have better luck there." The laughter that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. I walked away from the festival, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and the ruins of my enemies' reputations. The divorce would be finalized soon, the property divided, the lawyers paid. But this moment, this perfect, beautiful moment of absolute victory, would stay with me forever. Sometimes revenge really is a dish best served in public, with a sledgehammer and a crowd of witnesses. Justice had been served,